So we've heard 3 amazing stories on metamaterials, bioelectronics, and health in space, and I think it really all inspired by them by itself, but also maybe we can make a connection to the 3 of you for future collaborations, future ideas. I've seen that the future is here, also the kids. Maybe some of them left now because it's a bit late, but I wonder, maybe there are people in the room who want to ask something that connects the 3 stories. Are there already questions? Yeah?
I was thinking that if there are sensors that do not work in space, then those sensors are bound to produce electrical signals. So if the sensors don't work, Wouter, don't you think that you can replace those signals by fake signals and, for example, remove space sickness?
Well, that's what you can do that. Well, first of all, we go to the space station because we want weightlessness. That's why we go there, for all experiments. We accept that we have the negative effects because we want to do our research in microgravity conditions. Now, if you go, for example, to Mars, then the main objective is exploration and not weightlessness. You can do that in orbit around the Earth. So if you have a spaceship that goes to Mars, the best way would be 2 spaceships together, connected with a cable, and have it rotate. Then you have artificial gravity, and then you get rid of all these problems from weightlessness. So that would be. But of course, this is a technology that you have to master first. This will not be easy. So that would be something to prevent that. We have been thinking of a centrifuge on board of the space station to have astronauts rotate, but then you need very, very high rotation speed. So people get sick. It has a lot of vibration, which is bad for the experiments. So what we do to prevent bone loss and muscle loss is to do our sports. 2 hours per day we have dedicated to exercise. On a treadmill as running. So of course you have to be fixed with the harness, otherwise you're gone in one step, of course. And you can make that tighter and tighter, so you really have to feel that you have to run. Every other day we have to do a very serious bicycling on a bike without a saddle, but you don't need a saddle, so that's okay. So for your condition of your heart, for example. And then a very important one, a very beautiful piece of sports technology. We have the ARED, the resistance exercise device, advanced resistance exercise device. And this is our gym, because the best thing to prevent bone loss is put pressure on the bone. The bone cells are living tissue. You have to tell the bone cells that they have to create bone. So we have to put mechanical force on them. So we do weightlifting all the time.
We heard this actually in the talk of Amir, that indeed pressure on the bone is something very important.
Yes, so we have to do that.
Yeah, and this is how you do it now. So a lot of exercise, a lot of things from outside, actually quite some time you spend on it. So Wouter and Amir, do you think your techniques can actually maybe reduce this time for the astronauts to work on this?
I was wondering, some of the muscles, that put pressure on the bone, they can also be electrically stimulated.
Yep.
So you can have something like a body suit that provides the right electrical stimulation, and by this hopefully produce enough, say, pressure towards the bone so that they have a tendency to degenerate.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that happening?
We work on that. Professor Ricci in Switzerland. He has the PEMS, the peripheral electrical muscle stimulator.
Okay.
Very nasty, because they put the electrodes here. It doesn't feel good. They get this as if somebody hits you. But it's indeed to experiment to see if we can the electrical stimulation of the muscles to keep the muscle tone good and etc. And the Russians have so-called penguin suit. And this is a simple way to put pressure on the bone, but with a lot of elastic bands in the suit. And that, to stay straight, you have to use force. So, and then you also put force on the bones. So we try all kind of different things. Medication is used, but the best thing that works is mechanical stimulation. We had an experiment.
Who knows in the future that maybe
yes, absolutely.
The new technology.
Yeah. We had an experiment from Professor Kuipers, from a veterinarian in London, and he normally does the horses of Queen Elizabeth, but now we had astronauts, and they had a device, and the astronaut had to every day to 500 times as if you were walking. On one leg, you get a mass hitting the heel bone. And indeed, after the flight, there was no bone loss in that heel bone compared with the other side. So mechanical stimulation is a very important one to prevent bone loss. So if you can do that with this way,
your
that would be
system
great.
in the body actually.
You know, it doesn't have to happen. There are not everybody loses a bone and muscle after not using them. Like polar bears, they sleep for 6 months and they get up and they could go around. So it is actually the case that
But they don't have the weight loss.
no,
that's interesting.
Bed rest.
We do bed rest studies. Yes.
So it's very similar to microgravity. So what is used usually underground to simulate microgravity condition is bed rest. And it turns out that some of the astronauts who went to the space, they didn't lose any bone. And they were like, why in the world these astronauts are not losing any bone? And it turns out that they lack the genes that are regulating the effect of the mechanical signals on bone. So the question is, you know, at the end of the day, everything that happens through the mechanical loading is somehow translated to biochemical signals. So if you could emulate the effects of the mechanical signals through the biochemical sensory and the pathways, maybe you don't need mechanical loading. You can emulate that without actually having the mechanical loading. So that's not good for me because I'm a mechanical engineer, but that might be a solution for it.
Together with the bioelectronic suits, maybe, or even you can also implant something. You will save a lot of time to do experiments in space instead of work on restoring the body. Are there more people who want to ask a question? There's one in the back there, with the guy with the white shirt.
Test.
It works.
These self-folding materials that we saw in the self-folding structures that we saw in the first presentation, would they work the same in space, or would there be complications or other folding possibilities?
So there are different ways to create self-folding. I showed 2 of them. One of them was through elastic bands. That's probably going to work even better because you don't have gravity to pull them down. So that's probably even working better. Some of the other ones were helped by the gravity. So if you don't have gravity, those additional effects will not be there, but still these shape memory polymers, PLA is a shape memory polymer, which means that what we basically do is that we teach it to become shorter when it's going into hot environment. And that effect, I think, will be there still in the space. There is not, to my understanding, any reason to not have that effect in the space. And you know that, and there are other additional mechanisms like mechanical loading, like a host of other things. And I think they will work also in this space. Actually, André was already talking about shape memory alloys, and they are one of the ways to create self-folding or shape-shifting. So self-folding is a specific format of shape-shifting. And what is also interesting to understand is that there is a very nice connection between the origami that we do on the ground and origami in the space, because in both cases you want to have something small which becomes big. In my case, I want to do that because if it's small, you would be able to minimize the invasiveness of your surgery. In André's case, you probably don't have too much space, so you want to make it small at the beginning, but it should become large. Yeah, so it's a deployment strategy. It's origami. It is a deployable structure. The same technology, very different applications, very different scales.
Yes. Deploying solar panels. You want for solar panels, you want a big surface to get as much sunlight, but you don't want to launch a big surface.
No.
So that's the technology that you can nicely use for space. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. And was it also inspired on these kind of systems? Because we know that a lot of technology for space technology is actually later used, as you say, it travels back to Earth.
Yeah.
I think the first application of origami was in space. There was usually when there is a lot of money going to the space and military research, so the coolest things are usually happening first there. And I think one of the first actual applications of origami was there. So So these things, like in other applications in medical and other industries, are relatively recent as compared to the space applications.
I have to correct something about the money, because
Not enough money.
It's very visible always. People
Yeah.
say, "Well, waste of money for space. There's a lot of money, and what does it help us?" Well, everybody uses it, so everybody, it's already there. It's all these other things like exploration and research, etc. But it's not so much. The space station is 100 billion. That's a lot, but it's spread over 25 years over the complete northern hemisphere. The Netherlands are paying €1 per citizen per year on the space station. It's nothing, but it's very visible.
Yeah.
I mean, the money for the whole space station, I think they spend it on subsidizing French farmers every year or something in the EU. So there's not so much money going in science and technology, unfortunately. There should be much more.
Yeah.
But also NASA has less money than the Pentagon for space. The Pentagon has more money for space flight than NASA has. Just for their secret espionage satellites, etc.
I think that was what Amir said, that a lot of money is going into defense.
Military,
Yeah,
that's true. Yes, but
And I
not the
agree, there
space
should be
itself.
more money spent
Yes.
into that, because I think, like you said, it benefits a lot of other applications
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. Yeah.
It pushes forward technology. Yeah.
Exactly.
And Richard, if you hear all these stories,
Yeah.
what do you want? What's your big dream for the health initiative?
For the health initiative, so
Yeah.
I'm here for the health initiative, and my big dream is to, I think all the stories have in common, first to comment on your story. So when you have to do all those things to become an astronaut, it's all kind of discomfort to have a short moment of time, happiness maybe, that you are feeling really well in space. Well, that's quite a challenge on its own, I would say. And I think all the stories have in common that they try to improve human life in the end, and working towards that from a technological point of view or from a medical point of view. I think in the end, there's currently a series on Netflix. It's called Altered Carbon.
Yes,
And then it is really interesting how they combine knowledge with what the body in the end is. It's a kind of carrier for all the things that you want to do. And I think that's what the stories have in common, more or less.
Nice.
So we're working towards altered carbon. That's the answer.
So all watch the series if you want to continue in this field of research. We have time for a final question here in the front.
So I saw a lot of testing before spaceflight, during spaceflight, and after spaceflight. Actually, this question is for Professor Serdijn. Can't you just swallow one single pill that reads out all these signals from the muscles and everything and just gives that information rather than having all these tests done from outside?
Can you please repeat the question?
So can you can you implant a device or so that reads out all the signals back from the muscles? Like, are you atrophying, or are you? So the astronaut doesn't have to do all these tests anymore by people on Earth or in space for himself.
That's true. In principle, the answer is yes, because the muscles themselves, they not only respond to electricity, but they also produce electricity. So that's what they call electromyography. So you can read that, but I'm not sure whether if you want to have information on a lot of muscles, whether you really should open up the patient on every place, and especially not with the invasive technology that we have nowadays. So, but in principle, yes, and on the body you can also measure quite a lot of electromyography. So that definitely can lead to improvement. For instance, you can measure the electrical activity and you can feed it back to train the muscle or to reach out to the bones and prevent, say, bone degeneration, etc. That is possible. In principle, yes, but the technology is still very crude and big, and in many cases not applicable.
And especially maybe too big for space, or
you try to minimize the stuff that you send up, but this muscle measurement device that I showed also, it's pretty big, and so it's a lot of effort to get that up. But in these kind of experiments, we try this now and then with the EMGs to see what happens with the muscle. So it is used, but not automatically for all the astronauts.
Great. So André, what do you want these researchers to develop? So one works especially on bone growth, and the other on bioelectronics.
Yeah, of course, a lot of new technology we'd like to try out in space. What I said, if you change the biochemical system, then you don't need the mechanical force anymore. That's the best thing. What we found out now is bisphosphonates together with exercise. That seems to work the best to prevent the bone loss. What is very interesting for me to hear, there is individual differences, I knew that, but so this might be even a selection criteria in the future.
If you don't.
So to see if you can find out if somebody will have bone loss or not, that would be very interesting.
Yeah.
So, or we change our DNA and we become polar bears, and we have no more bone loss in space.
It's all become
so it would not be a
plastic.
bad idea. So, of course, these technologies are better because now you need big devices, a lot of time, 2 hours per day, just to stay in good condition. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
So, if you can do that differently. With a magic pill or change your DNA, then of course...
Or implants.
Of course, it's still in the region of science fiction, but you know, the world in which we live now was pure science fiction for not so long ago.
Just
so
a few years ago,
will
exactly.
happen.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And also the electrical stimulation of muscles, that's, if we can do it that way, there were ideas of vibration plates in the space station to have stimulation of the bone through vibration. The problem is, of course, that you also have to do very delicate experiments with weightless crystal growth or whatever. So you don't want too much devices to get mechanical stimulation of the bone. So everything is with big springs to prevent that the vibration of a training device is getting to the experiment. So that's always a tricky point. The main objective is research in microgravity. So bad luck for the astronauts if you get some bone loss then.
Yeah. It's worth it probably. So I think we have to finish our evening, which was very inspiring. Do you still want to add something, or shall we finish and go for drinks and more music?
No, I want to finish, and I want to thank you all for contributing to this first Health College lecture, and I hope we see you again in maybe a month or 3. We have a present for you, which has nothing to do at all with healthcare. It is to cook your eggs in the right time with a sound system. I hope you enjoy. And I want to thank Martine Diepenbrugge. She's over there, and she was organizing this event. So thank Martine.